Mom's Playground. Hooray!
The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, give a 5-star rating, and leave a review. Check out all our past episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you pod. What if these celebrities weren't famous? What would they have become? What was their first job? We're about to find out.
Well, our next guest is one of the most intelligent people in the world. That's right, the world, planet Earth. And you would think that one of the most intelligent people in the world is, a brain surgeon or a rocket scientist. No, we're going to be talking to a game show host. But Ken Jennings is no ordinary game show host. He won Jeopardy, an amazing amount of episodes. I want to say 74 episodes. He has the most earnings in the history of the game, which I believe is close to $5 million. He's gone on to write several books, and they brought him back to ultimately host the show a couple of years ago. And what an incredible life this guy has led. And by the way, author of a lot of books, including his latest, 100 Places to See After You Die, a travel guide to the afterlife. He's kind of a funny guy, too. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest this week on Celebrity Jobber, the host of Jeopardy, who is Ken Jennings.
Hey, good morning.
How's it going, man?
Doing well.
I got to tell you, I'm sure you hear this a lot. My 87-year-old father watches Jeopardy every night. This is what he said, every night before bed. I said, Dad, doesn't Jeopardy come on at 7:30? It comes on at 7 o'clock or 7:30, but watches it every night before bed. So how has your life changed in the last 15 years? I mean, it's probably been about 15 years since we were introduced to you initially, right?
Almost 20. I tried out 20 years ago this month.
Wow.
2004, if you can believe it.
Where
does time go?
Did you do that? Like, how did you try out? Did you try out? I know Wheel of Fortune comes to town and stuff like that. Does the Brain Bus, doesn't that come to town?
That used to be how it worked. Today you can try out online. Just go to Jeopardy.com and you could take the anytime test any day of the week. But in my day, you had to wait for the Brain Bus to come to your town, and they never came.
Oh, no.
A friend of mine and I hopped in a car and drove to L.A. just to try out for Jeopardy, which we tell people not to do. You know, the odds are very long. But in my case, we both passed the test, and I got on the show.
Both of you? That's really crazy.
We were on, the Quiz Bowl team in college. We were, pretty serious about this. We were going to be on Jeopardy.
You were on the Quiz Bowl team. And where did you go to college, Ken?
I was at University of Washington and then transferred and graduated from Brigham Young in Utah.
BYU. All right. Well, I heard you had a pretty interesting life because you didn't only, grow up here in the States. Did you grow up in Washington and or Utah or both?
Yeah, Seattle born and raised, but then my family moved overseas when I was in second grade. So I spent a decade living in Asia, and we only had the one TV channel. We had Armed Forces TV. So my whole childhood, we had one thing we could watch. Me and all my friends watched the exact same shows at the exact same time every day. No DVD, no streaming, no satellite. And by a coincidence of Pentagon programming, the Army put on Jeopardy every day after school. So me and all my friends were devoted Jeopardy fans, from the age of 10 up. And it was always my favorite show. And I can't believe that I'm still working there today. It's a dream come true.
It really is an incredible story. So tell me about your dad. What did he do? Because you moved to South Korea and Singapore for, you said, about a decade. What was his occupation?
He was a lawyer. He was working for a firm in Seattle, and he got a chance to move to Korea for a couple of years, where he had, he spoke Korean. He had lived there in college for a while. He was excited to go back, and we thought it would just be 2 years, and we loved it. It's a great way to raise kids, is to let them see a little bit of the world, I think. And they ended up living in Asia for 15 years.
Now, do you think, Ken, that it played maybe a little bit of a role in your education, or maybe just your school regimen, maybe because you were out there and the culture maybe was more, academically centered than here in the States? Do you think maybe living there might have played a role for your lover of knowledge?
Yeah, I would say living overseas is broadening. The international schools are usually pretty good. The main thing is that, like, it kind of made me obsessed with American pop culture. We were, all of us, just dying to know what was going on in the States. So if somebody brought over a videotape that had some Saturday Night Live sketches or you know, a Tonight Show, or even a bunch of like Burger King commercials, we would just wear that out because we didn't have any of that. You know, we were, to this day, I'm kind of obsessed with pop culture, and I think it's my childhood where it was kind of a scarcity.
And tell me, Ken, what was your very first job, your very first paying job?
It was a campus job, touch typing. It was like a touch typing for a professor. I'm a 90-minute per word or 90 word per minute typist. So that was my first job, and then I wound up in computers at the time I went on Jeopardy. So
before Jeopardy, okay, you go to college, you graduate from BYU, and then your first job out of college was in the computer industry for a healthcare company, correct?
Yeah, I was an English major, but it didn't seem like that was going to pay the bills. I was a little worried about that. And a friend had an internet startup, so I went to work with him and later wound up programming for a healthcare company in Salt Lake. And was actually having a pretty good life in 2004 when Jeopardy came calling.
Yeah, so things weren't like, it wasn't like Ken Jennings is like on Skid Row, and it wasn't like you had some kind of ridiculous rags to riches story. You're actually living a pretty good life.
Well, you know, we had just bought a little house outside Salt Lake. My son had just been born, but I wasn't super good at my job. Like, I was having an early midlife crisis because I was not a good computer programmer. And I was thinking, what do I want to do with my life? And luckily, the second act turned out to be a game show of all things. And 20 years later, here we are, and I'm still hosting it. It is so cool, though, Ken. So I know it sounds like a dumb question, and you know what? I'm sure you're going to, a couple times in this conversation, you're going to be like, oh, this guy is a dumb guy. I would feel a lot of people are probably, they feel inferior when talking to you. But your big break, I mean, because there's been so many different things that have happened to you, but what do you consider your big break? Was it just getting on Jeopardy? Was it winning that very first game? Was it when you became, Ken Jennings, the all-time winner in the 74-game streak? What do you consider your big break in this whole story? I mean, the most exciting moment is winning that first game. Nothing's as good as your first time, I think. And that already exceeded my expectations. I guess the thing that changed my story was probably winning the Jeopardy Greatest of All Time tournament in 2020, because I hadn't been on the show in a while. I thought I was going to lose to James Holzhauer, and I got lucky and I won one. And it was around the same time that Alex had announced his cancer diagnosis, and Jeopardy was looking at hosting options. And I think without that GOAT tournament, I don't think I'm on Jeopardy today. That's the big one right there, because it was a series of small little Jeopardy events that happened to you that got you here today. But that one game, that was the one that you think really changed it all. I think so, because up until that time, I just finished second place to another amazing player, Brad Rutter. Every time I went on the Jeopardy, I'd finished second to Brad, and it was clear that he was the best player of his generation. And I got away with one against Brad and James in 2020. I'm happy to say, and it was nice to play with Alex one more time. That was the main reason I wanted to do that tournament. I wanted to see Alex host one more time up close. Can you tell me a little bit about Alex Trebek? Like when the camera was off, what kind of a guy was he? Because he doesn't really break character on the show. He's pretty straightforward. What kind of a guy? What can you tell us about Alex Trebek? Yeah, people assumed he was very serious because he was always so matter-of-fact on Jeopardy, but that was just to keep the game moving. During commercials, he would always take questions from the crowd, and he was funny. He would tell jokes, he would do a little bit of song and dance. I saw him do impressions. He was a very normal, down-to-earth guy. Often I would be leaving the lot, and I'd see Alex driving off in his Dodge Ram pickup truck, and he's got a Canadian tuxedo on. He's got denim head to toe. He was still like a working-class Ontario kid. He was an amazing guy. The Canadian tuxedo, by the way, here in the state of Florida, we do call that, it's somewhat of a Floridian tuxedo as well. And that, for people listening out there that don't know what that is a denim, jeans with a jean jacket. I can't see Alex Trebek sporting that. Yeah, it's so different from his dapper TV image. But, like, I host Jeopardy. We do 5 in a day. So I head to Jeopardy. I fly down to L.A., I tape 10 shows, I fly home, and that leaves me a lot of free time. It's a good side gig, but really my day job now is I'm a writer.
Now, I'm glad you mentioned that because Ken, you're a funny guy. I like watching you on Twitter. I do know that you wrote a book called Planet Funny, How Comedy Took Over Our Culture. And you were saying that basically when you were in South Korea and Singapore, you were just loving anything that had to do with American pop culture, Saturday Night Live skits. Is that where you kind of developed your sense of humor?
I think so. I think that's what it is. And all my books touch on pop culture in one way or another, I think. The new book is called 100 Places to See After You Die, and it's a travel guide to the afterlife. But it's not just, it's ancient pop culture. It's Homer and Dante. But it's also, modern pop culture. It's The Good Place and, the stuff from my childhood, Beetlejuice and The Sixth Sense and Field of Dreams, different versions of heaven and hell and limbo from thousands of years of human culture. And I think it's more about pop culture than death, honestly.
100 Places to See After You Die, a travel guide to the afterlife. It's not like, hey, I'm going on vacation. Let's pick up Ken Jennings' book. Is it that, or is it more humorous? Because you were just mentioning, it's written in a certain style. It's kind of funny. It's touching on American pop culture. You just mentioned Beetlejuice. It's not going to be useful for people that are traveling the globe, correct?
No, this is things to see after you die. This is, do I like the Norse Valhalla? Do I like the Aztec underworld of Mictlan? Where are the best places to stay in Dante's Inferno? Where do I get the best street food in that city from the Pixar movie Coco? It's a close-up look at how humans have imagined what the possibilities might be in the world to come. Because I think it tells us a lot about ourselves, it says what we think God is, what we think the meaning of life is, what matters, what a good life lived here on earth was as well.
Were you always a writer, Ken? Like in college, were you a guy that loved writing? Because you've written a lot of books here, and it seems like this is something you must enjoy.
This is my 13th book. I was an English major in college who wondered if I would go on to be a professor or something. At some point, somebody told me the old joke, what's the difference between an English major and a large pepperoni pizza? Okay, the difference between an English major and a large pepperoni pizza. I give up. What? The pizza can feed a family of 4. And I think that's what influenced me to think, well, maybe being a writer is not for me. So I do feel lucky that after Jeopardy, I got the chance to write a book, and this is now my 13th one. That's really my day job when I'm not hosting Jeopardy. Is it like when you're looking at that blank page before the book has ever been written, is that the most challenging part? Like it's like, okay, here it is, my next book. Okay, maybe you come up with the title by Ken Jennings, and then you're looking at the blank page and you're like, okay, go. Is that a tough spot right there? You already kind of know where you're going before you even start writing? Well, I've always been curious about everything, and I'm interested in everything. And for me, that means the research is actually the best part of the book. Spending a couple years reading up on versions of the afterlife from literature, time in a library finding Buddhist sutras and medieval mystics who saw heaven. That was a lot of fun, watching every episode of The Good Place or The Twilight Zone where they go to the afterlife. Research is fun, but then you're right. At some point, you face the blank page. And, hopefully your research carries you through. And at that point, you've got a vision of what the story is you want to tell. But yeah, like many writers, I do not enjoy writing. I enjoy having written. That's the best pleasure. What do you think you'd be doing today, Ken, if it wasn't for Jeopardy and this, incredible life that, do you ever think about what you might be doing? I think about it a lot, because unlike many people, my life has that one hinge where if I don't get Final Jeopardy right on June 30th, June 2nd, 2004 or whatever it is, I just fly home and go back to my job, and I'm probably a middle-aged computer programmer right now. I'm probably mildly unhappy, but doing okay. Kids are still in college. I'm probably still binging Better Call Saul and And the last season of Succession, some things are the same.
Right.
But I'm not hosting Jeopardy. I'm just watching it at home like everybody else. It's interesting to think about how one little day just changed my whole life.
It's basically the whole point of this whole podcast. Ken Jennings, the author of 100 Places to See After You Die, a travel guide to the afterlife. Thank you so much, Ken. I appreciate your time, man.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
What a great guest. Ken Jennings, when asked him what he thought his big break was, kind of a two-parter. He says, nothing more exciting than winning that very first game. And that, stuck out as a life changer to him. And that stuck out as a quote unquote big break to him. But then he quickly went into the thing that really changed my life, or changed everything for me, was when he won the greatest of all time Jeopardy tournament, which only happened in 2020. And it's kind of funny because if you think about it, Ken Jennings, you would have to say before 2020, you would say, oh, yeah, that's the Jeopardy guy. That's the guy that won all those games on Jeopardy. But now, since he won that greatest of all time tournament, we're talking to Ken Jennings, the author, and he wrote books, before that tournament. But now we know about them. Now he's the host of Jeopardy. So he considers that greatest of all time Jeopardy tournament in 2020 as the big life changer for him. Ken's first job was actually a typist for one of his professors in college. He typed 90 words per minute. Me and a friend of mine, before we had Ken on, we were pontificating what Ken's first job might have been. And we had all these different scenarios, like maybe he was a pizza delivery guy, and then all of a sudden he's delivering the pizza and he hears a commercial about the University of Wisconsin in the background, and he chimes into the family. Little known fact about the University of Wisconsin, they have more trees on campus per square mile than any, like a Cliff Clavin type of guy. Like, how annoying is this pizza delivery guy? But anyway, Ken was not a pizza delivery guy. He was a typist, once again, for a college professor. And also, when he got out of college, he was in the computer programming business for a healthcare company. He says he wasn't very good at it. But the real question was, what do you think he might be doing now if it wasn't for all this Jeopardy business? And he says he thinks about it all the time. Probably just, being a Joe Schmo in middle America, probably living in Utah, and a couple of kids and an okay computer programmer, and, living an okay life, but nothing like he's living right now. Ken Jennings. What a great story, and what a cool guy. And I don't think I sounded like too much of a dope. The key words here, too much. If you would be so kind to leave a 5-star review if you like this podcast, and a nice review would be preferable. You can check out the Celebrity Jobber podcast on Instagram, of course, celebrityjobber.com, for all past episodes, and available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you consume your podcasts. Until next week, thank you once again for listening to the Celebrity Jobber podcast. I'm Jeff Zito.